Hi guys, here's the chapter 3 reading. Chapter 4. Okay, chapter 3. The bus to Piazza was much smaller than the big red ones that rumble in and out of Cademi. It was packed tight with people already. It's full, I said, hanging back, but Yusuf gave me a shove in the back and I shot in through the door, almost into the lap of a fat lady with a black scarf tied round her head. My face went hot with embarrassment, but I didn't have time to think about it, because then Yusuf gave Grandfather a push and he almost landed on top of her too. Somehow or other, everyone shuffled up a bit, and Grandfather got to sit down properly, with me squashed between him and the fat lady. Then the boy by the door slid it shut with a slam and we were off. It was awful. I couldn't help leaning on the fat lady, and she kept prodding me with her elbows, muttering with annoyance, and the bus set off with a roar, then lurched about all over the place. Nobody seemed to think there was anything odd about it. I couldn't imagine how people lived like this all the time. I was worried about paying the fare because I had no idea how much money it would cost. I started trying to pull the money pouch out from inside my shirt. Luckily, Grandfather knew what to do. He fished some coins out of his pocket and gave them to the boy, who accepted them with a nod. It was stuffy in the bus. I didn't mind the smell of hot people, but the petrol fumes were disgusting, and I thought I was going to be sick. I can't be sick, I told myself. I mustn't be sick. Please don't let me be sick. Just when I thought I'd have to be, the boy by the door called out Piazza, and the bus jerked to a stop, and the door slid open and everyone tumbled out. I'd been dreading this bit. I kept remembering what Abba had said about Grandfather being old, and how he hadn't seen Addis Ababa for years, and how I would have to look after him. I can't look after him, I thought, feeling panicky. I can't look after myself. I don't know where we are, or where to go. I needn't have worried after all. Grandfather had settled his shawl back round his shoulders, and now he looked ready to set off. Don't stand there gawping, Solomon, he said. Come here. What do you expect me to lean on? Thin air? Then he set off, his hand clamped onto my shoulder, and we pushed our way through the crowds of people. I felt worse than I'd felt all day. My feet hurt, my ears buzzed with the noise of the people and the traffic, and my stomach was still lurching after the ride in the bus. Are we nearly there, Grandfather? I wanted to ask, but I didn't because it would have sounded childish. But then Grandfather's hand twisted on my shoulder as he pushed me out of the big crowded street and down a little lane. He stopped. Is this it? I said. He didn't answer, and looking up I saw something I'd never seen before. Grandfather was unsure of himself. He looked smaller all of a sudden, and older. We'd stopped outside a corrugated iron fence, and as we stood there, a door in it opened and a man stepped out. He looked about the same age as my father. Grandfather cleared his throat. Good day, he said, in a voice that sounded almost quavery. Is this the house of Mr. Wandu? The man was setting off up the lane, but he stopped and turned. Yes. It was evening already, and the light had almost gone. The man leaned forward to look closely at Grandfather. Uncle de Missy, is that you? I felt almost weak with relief, and I could tell that Grandfather did too. Wandu, my boy, it's you, isn't it? They clasped each other's hands and touched shoulders, right, then left, then right. But even in the dim light, I could see that what Grandfather couldn't. My father's cousin looked as if he'd had a nasty shock. He almost looked scared of us, I thought. He wishes we hadn't come anyway. Cousin Wandu seemed to pull himself together and managed a weak smile. Come in, Uncle, he said, leading us into his compound. Where have you come from? Have you travelled far? Only from home, Grandfather said. We had crossed a little patch of bare earth in front of the house, and now Cousin Wandu was opening the door. And how was the journey? I suppose the bus was jam-packed. Did it break down? It always did when I travel out of Addis. He's laughing at us, I thought. He thinks we're ignorant. What bus? We walked, of course, Grandfather said. His sharpness usually scared me, but I was glad to hear it in his voice now. You walked? Wandu sounded astonished. A woman had pushed aside the bead curtain that covered a door at the back of her room. She had a narrow face and a sharp look in her eyes. She started in alarm when she saw us, and pushed away the little girl who was holding on to her skirt. Meseret, you remember Uncle Demissy, said Cousin Wandu. It's wonderful to see him after all this time, isn't it? He sounded almost pleading. You're welcome, said Cousin Meseret unwillingly. Who's this? All eyes stood on me. I stood there feeling stupid. A hot flush spread right through me. He's Solomon, my grandson, Grandfather said shortly. He walked all the way from Kadami too. Cousin Wandu didn't seem to be able to believe it. Of course he did, said Grandfather. It's nothing to a boy his age. When I was 11, And he started on one of his rambling stories. All I could think was, when are they going to give us a drink and something to eat? They did at last, of course. There was a lot of bustling about, and I heard sharp words from Cousin Meseret, who was in the kitchen behind the living room. She was telling Cousin Wandu what to do. I was a bit shocked, quite honestly. Ma would never have talked to Abba like that. At last, Cousin Wandu came up with some bottles of orange soda for us to drink. I was glad I had a fizzy drink once at Marco's house, or the bubbles would have given me a real surprise. He looked nervous as he fumbled with the bottle opener. You'll stay here with us, of course, Cousin Wandu said, shooting a glance at his wife, who nodded, smiling stiffly. Something inside me relaxed. I hadn't realised how worried I'd been about where we were going to sleep that night. Yes, I thought triumphantly, we've made it, we're here. I don't remember much more about that evening, because as soon as we'd had supper, and it was a nice one too, with plenty of meat, I felt so sleepy that I could hardly keep my eyes open. I did hear Grandfather said, it's only for a couple of nights, Wandu. There's a man I have to see tomorrow. We'll be going home the day after that. And I saw the relief in Cousin Wandu's eyes as he said unconvincingly, stay as long as you like, Uncle. You know that my house is your house.